Imagine a mirror. It reflects your image, but only what stands before it. What lies beyond its view remains invisible, yet it still exists. In Carl Jung's perspective, the shadow is exactly that, the hidden portion of the psyche, made up of aspects of ourselves we prefer to ignore, reject, or forget. However, unlike a mirror's reflection, the shadow doesn't remain passive. When ignored, it grows stronger in silence, subtly shaping our lives in often destructive ways. For Jung, the shadow houses the repressed traits of our personality, fears, impulses, desires, and weaknesses that contradict the image we strive to project to the world. Yet it isn't merely a reservoir of darkness. It also contains creative potentials, instincts, and truths we neglect out of fear or shame. Ignoring this dimension isn't a solution. On the contrary, repressing the shadow makes it even more potent, influencing our choices and actions unconsciously. Contemporary culture promotes the idea that we should always focus on the positive side of life, being happy, productive, inspiring. In this context, the shadow is seen as an unnecessary burden, a weakness to be fought. But can we build something solid on a foundation that denies part of our essence? Jung would argue no. Integrating the shadow, though uncomfortable, is essential for achieving an authentic existence and unlocking our true potential. When we avoid confronting the shadow, it doesn't disappear. On the contrary, it infiltrates our actions, thoughts, and emotions. It's like an underground current that will eventually surge to the surface with unexpected force. How often do we find ourselves reacting disproportionately to a situation, or worse, harming ourselves or others in ways we can't even explain? These are clear signs of the shadow's influence. A classic example of this is the concept of projection. Jung observed that we often attribute to others the traits we deny in ourselves. Criticizing someone's arrogance might be our own suppressed pride in disguise. Irrational hatred for a colleague might reflect traits we'd rather not acknowledge in ourselves. This defense mechanism is the shadow's way of making itself known, albeit in a distorted and often harmful form. On a societal level, the collective denial of the shadow manifests as prejudice, wars, and fanaticism. When a group or nation refuses to confront its flaws, it projects its shadow onto the other, creating external enemies to justify internal conflicts. This pattern can be seen throughout history, from religious persecutions to extreme political polarizations. What we deny in ourselves, we seek to destroy in the outside world. Despite its destructive side, the shadow isn't an enemy to be eliminated, but a potential ally. Jung believed that by confronting the shadow with courage and honesty, we can uncover parts of ourselves that enrich our lives. Repressed anger, for example, can be transformed into assertiveness. Fear can become caution. Vulnerability can open doors to deeper connections. This process of integration is what Jung called individuation, the path to becoming a whole person. It requires self-awareness, reflection, and often external support, such as psychotherapy. By embracing the shadow, we stop being slaves to its unconscious manipulations and become architects of our own destiny. Confronting the shadow is a journey that demands courage and humility. Often, we're tempted to focus only on what comforts us, but Jung reminds us that true growth happens at the threshold between light and darkness. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Indeed, this means that transformation only occurs when we acknowledge what we've been avoiding. The first step in this process is developing the ability to self-reflect. Instead of reacting automatically to situations, we start asking ourselves, why do I feel this way? What does this say about me? Behind every intense emotion, such as anger, envy, or resentment, lies an aspect of the shadow asking to be heard. While this practice can be uncomfortable, it's also liberating. The more aware we become of what's hidden, the less control these unconscious forces have over us. Practices like reflective writing, meditation, or therapeutic analysis become essential here. These methods create a safe space to explore our deepest thoughts and feelings without judgment. The key is understanding that recognizing the shadow doesn't make us worse people, but more complete. After all, we aren't defined solely by what's visible. Our strength lies in integrating what's hidden. While the destructive side of the shadow can be intimidating, it also holds immense potential waiting to be awakened. Often, what we've relegated to the shadow are traits we couldn't develop due to external pressures or the upbringing we received. A shy person, for instance, might have suppressed their natural assertiveness out of fear of rejection. Yet, when acknowledged and integrated, that assertiveness can be transformed into confidence and determination. The shadow is also a wellspring of creativity. Great artists, writers, and innovators have often tapped into their shadows to bring their most impactful works to life. Think of how pain, doubt, and chaos can be transformed into beautiful songs, paintings, or groundbreaking inventions. What Jung called the gold in the shadow is this ability to turn what we perceive as negative into something constructive. By integrating the shadow, we gain greater freedom to explore the full spectrum of our humanity. This doesn't just mean accepting our imperfections, but also embracing the growth opportunities they present. Recognizing our flaws makes us more empathetic toward others, as we understand that everyone faces similar internal battles. But what happens when we continue to ignore the shadow? The answer is both simple and unsettling. It takes control. People who consistently repress their shadows risk leading fragmented lives, trapped in self-sabotaging behavioral patterns. This can manifest as a constant sense of dissatisfaction, tumultuous relationships, or an existential void that feels impossible to fill. Moreover, an unacknowledged shadow can express itself through physical or emotional symptoms. Jung observed that the psyche finds ways to make itself heard when ignored. This might include anxiety attacks, depression, or even psychosomatic illnesses. Often, these signals are invitations from the unconscious, urging us to take a closer look at what we're trying to avoid. In the long run, denying the shadow stifles our potential because it prevents us from embracing our whole selves. To grow and evolve, we must confront our fears, insecurities, and uncomfortable truths. Only then can we find authenticity and inner peace. The shadow doesn't only operate within us, it also shows up in our relationships. Jung believed that human interactions are often fertile ground for projections, where we see in others what we struggle to accept in ourselves. This is why the most intense relationships, whether romantic, familial, or professional, can also be the most challenging. They force us to confront parts of our shadow we might prefer to ignore. Take, for example, the irritation someone causes you. Often, the trait that bothers us in others is something we've repressed in ourselves. If a very authoritarian person angers us, it might be because we're denying our own desire to be assertive. Or, if we envy someone's success, it could reflect ambitions of our own that we've abandoned out of fear. These projections are the shadow's way of seeking our attention. However, if we're unaware of this process, our relationships can become arenas for repetitive conflicts and misunderstandings. Recognizing that what bothers us in others may be a reflection of ourselves is a crucial step toward personal growth and building healthier connections. When we integrate the shadow, we begin to see others with greater clarity and compassion. Instead of projecting our insecurities or repressed desires, we start perceiving people as they truly are. This not only strengthens our relationships, but also frees us from the traps of comparison, judgment, and resentment. If the individual shadow is already powerful, the collective shadow can be even more overwhelming. Jung described the collective unconscious as a reservoir of symbols, myths, and archetypes shared by all of humanity. Within this reservoir, the collective shadow gathers the fears, prejudices, and impulses that a culture, group, or society represses together. A clear example of this is prejudice. When a society projects its shadow onto a specific group, be it based on race, class, gender, or religion, it creates destructive divisions. Instead of addressing its own internal problems, the society externalizes its shadow, turning the other into a scapegoat. Historically, this has led to persecution, wars, and genocide. Contemporary political polarization is also a reflection of the collective shadow. In an increasingly divided world, opposing groups often see in the other everything they reject in themselves. The result is a cycle of hatred and violence that perpetuates disconnection and prevents real progress. Integrating the collective shadow is undoubtedly a monumental challenge, but it's not impossible. It begins at the individual level. The more people are willing to confront their personal shadows, the less they'll project their fears and prejudices onto the collective. Additionally, open dialogue, education, and cultural reflection can help illuminate the shadowy aspects of society, fostering deeper and lasting change. To integrate the shadow, practices that encourage self-awareness and transformation are essential. One of the most effective approaches is psychotherapy, especially those inspired by Jung's ideas, such as analytical psychology. In these sessions, individuals are encouraged to explore their dreams, thoughts, and emotions, uncovering patterns that reveal hidden aspects of the psyche. Other valuable practices include dream work, a realm where the shadow often reveals itself. Jung regarded dreams as portals to the unconscious, offering symbolic imagery that reflects our internal struggles. Carefully interpreting these dreams can provide valuable insights into what lies hidden in our shadow. Creative activities like writing, painting, or dancing are also powerful ways to explore and express the shadow. When we allow ourselves to create without censorship, we give voice to parts of ourselves we usually repress. This not only releases pent-up emotional energy, but also helps us see our impulses and desires more clearly. Finally, it's crucial to remember that the journey of integration is not a destination, but a continuous process. The shadow is never fully tamed or overcome. It's a dynamic part of our psyche, constantly shifting and evolving as we grow. What matters is the commitment to look inward, with honesty and compassion whenever the shadow manifests. The shadow is a paradox. On one hand, it has the potential to destroy us, sabotaging our goals, harming our relationships, and eroding our inner peace. On the other hand, it contains the seeds of profound renewal, a psychological and spiritual rebirth. Jung reminds us that confronting the shadow is inevitable, but we can choose how we engage with it, resist and suffer the consequences, or embrace its presence and transform it into an allied force. A crucial point is understanding that integrating the shadow doesn't eliminate the challenging aspects of our psyche, but transforms our relationship with them. This shift allows us to take responsibility for our actions and reactions instead of blaming external forces. This self-responsibility forms the foundation of an authentic and fulfilling life. When we acknowledge the shadow, it ceases to be an invisible enemy and becomes part of the narrative of who we are, a narrative we can consciously rewrite. History is filled with figures who faced their shadows and emerged stronger. Consider Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison confronting his frustrations, anger, and despair. Rather than letting these emotions consume him, he acknowledged and transformed them into determination, leaving a legacy of reconciliation and unity. In literature, characters like Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Carol illustrate the power of confronting the shadow. The miserly old man is forced to face the ghosts of his past, present, and future, a process symbolizing the journey of shadow integration. By accepting his flaws and re-evaluating his values, he is reborn as a more compassionate and generous person. These examples show that the journey of the shadow is universal, yet deeply personal. Each individual faces unique challenges, but the potential for transformation is always present, as long as there is a willingness to look within. For Jung, integration was not about defeating the shadow, but finding balance between light and darkness. He believed that the goal of life was not to achieve idealized perfection, but wholeness, to be a complete person who embraces both virtues and flaws. This balance is crucial because denying the shadow creates an internal imbalance that manifests outwardly. Cultures that overemphasize positivity and success often produce individuals disconnected from themselves, trapped in cycles of anxiety and dissatisfaction. In contrast, embracing the full spectrum of human experience, including pain, failure, and fear, allows us to live with greater depth and purpose. As the yin-yang symbol illustrates, there is a spark of light in darkness and a shadow in light. Ignoring either side disconnects us from the complexity of existence. Recognizing this duality equips us to face life with courage and flexibility, accepting highs and lows as equally valuable parts of the journey. Why does ignoring the shadow destroy your potential? Because it is an essential part of who you are. Denying the shadow is like trying to walk with half your body paralyzed. Eventually, you'll stumble. Embracing the shadow, on the other hand, unlocks a force that can transform how you see yourself, how you act, and how you live. The journey to integrate the shadow is one of the most challenging tasks you can undertake, but it is also one of the most rewarding. It requires courage, introspection, patience, and acceptance. As Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens." The invitation is open. Look within. Acknowledge the shadow. Discover the potential it holds to transform your life. After all, it is in the depths that we find the most valuable treasures.